Hello, good morning. Thanks so much for inviting me over here. I have to say I was rather surprised to be invited to speak at TED at all. Because, of course, All right, thanks again for having me over here. Of course, as you heard this morning, TED Talks are really meant for people with a focus, meant for people who have a singular drive, a singular passion in life. And that's what makes it particularly surprising, because you're inviting me, a journalist. That's actually who I am. The human Swiss Army penknife, if you like. I don't do any one thing. I carry them all with me and try to do the best job I can with that. And this is how the world really sees journalists. We're generalists, right? What am I an expert on today? And that's really your answer there. What we do have, though, is a lot of experience. We come to this profession because we're generalists, but because we have a love of life and we have a love of expression. So let me just explain a little bit about myself. I am, as they introduced me, a senior editor with CNN-IBN. I've been with them for about 6 years. I host the show Worldview, which is on world affairs. Many years ago, I learned I had to unlearn the familiar, because for about 10 years, I used to work with CNN International. And I used to decode India for the world in that sense. And then I moved to CNN-IBN and worked on world affairs. So suddenly I was doing exactly the opposite. I was decoding the world for our viewers in India. And that is in fact me at that time. I know that many of you are thinking, she did 10 years in one place, she did 6 years in another. Something's not quite right, particularly in this day and age. Nobody sticks around that long. Either she can't find a job, another job, or she simply needs to go out and unlearn the familiar. But actually, it's just that you end up loving your work as much, and you don't have so much time to go out there looking for more jobs. Let me take you back a bit. The fact is, when you talk about learning the unfamiliar, the truth is, in our lives as journalists, there is no familiar. Every day you wake up, there's something new. Every day there's a new story to chase. And yesterday's story is so passé. As I said, rulers of yesterday, as you can see, are fugitives today. The meek of the past, I mean, we're talking just in the last year, these are the pictures. They inherit the earth today. That picture of the ladies from Jan Satyagraha who've actually been able to get the first landless deal from the government without anything but just a massive march all the way to Delhi. And you know the rest. Myanmar seen elections you haven't seen in decades, free elections at that, the Arab Spring, the outpouring of support for Malala, which is why I say the meek of the past, in fact, do inherit the earth today. Enemies become friends, friends become enemies, some become frenemies, and we get to meet them all as journalists. I just put that picture of Oprah to show off, so please be suitably impressed by that. That is the idea. But as we keep talking, you know, the fact is every day you see something new, something you've never seen before. You see the power of nature, and you realize anything, when you talk about mass destruction, nothing humans can do can be as powerful as what nature can do. Nature can reduce, with just one big wave, can reduce buildings this size down to the ground. You see, the earth split up suddenly, and everything that was familiar to you becomes unfamiliar. You can't recognize cities once nature has had a go. Of course, humans do their bit as well. A lot of destruction comes just because somebody purposely goes out to destroy, brutally, cruelly, as you can see in each of these cases. Something is changing in your world all the time. You also get to see stuff being rebuilt and renewed. I was particularly happy about that story I was able to do, because it was just 3 months after the tsunami. You can see those boats that were completely wrecked in the Nagapattinam harbor. 3 months later, we were able to go and see new boats, fiberglass boats for all these fishermen. That was certainly exciting. What are these other pictures? That's a cinema hall in Srinagar, which now does show films all over again after the militancy. That's a hotel, rumored to have been used by the CRPF as a detention center. These are all stories of renewal that we get. But the basic that everybody knows, and particularly in journalism we know, is what goes up must come down. Oops. Many of you must be from Delhi. Is there a way of putting that on? Anyway. Anybody from Delhi here? Okay, thank you. But that's basically Raisina Hill. That's where all the corridors of power are. That's the President's house, and to the right and left, the Prime Minister's office, the Defense Ministry, the Finance Ministry, and so forth. And we, as journalists, sit over here, right? You can see us standing right at the bottom. Through the day, through the heat, through the winter. And I always say to my friends in government, you know, you can be whoever you want. But at the end of the day, we'll watch you go up that hill, and we'll watch you come down that hill. And journalists will just stand there watching. Because that's what we do. We're observers, we report, we're fly-on-the-wallers. We have, as I said, a lot of experience. We don't have, and we have a lot of experience in our memory bank, as they say, but we don't have a lot of balance in our real banks. In fact, Mukund's left right now, but I just wanted you to see the kind of comparisons there are. Most of you would not know that if you do a search with job search companies online worldwide, and this is true of India as well, but these are the global figures and the American figures, that the average journalist gets paid 61% less than any other advertised job. 61% less. So for an example, there's a media PR executive. He's just the person who deals with the media, but is in PR. Goes from $35,000 for journalists to $60,000 for media PR executives. And they wonder why we're so mean to the PR guys. And if you look at advertising executives, it's even more. It's $88,000, which gives you a good idea of why you see so many ads, not news on television right now. All right. Now the fact is that we unlearn the familiar every day that we work. We also go out to learn the unfamiliar. This is so much a part of what we do and what drives us every day. Let me tell you what I have learned. And I believe in the power of threes as well. The first thing I've learned is that the most unfamiliar place for us in India is our neighborhood. This is how we see India. Surrounded by this ring of fire, trouble everywhere. I want to ask in our audience, how many of you have traveled with families in the neighborhood, say to Nepal or Sri Lanka? Okay, there are a few hands here. What about Bangladesh and Pakistan? I'm quite encouraged. Has anyone been to Afghanistan? We're laughing. How many of you have been or would like to go to Dubai or Singapore? And of course, need I say the US and the UK? You get my point. You see why I'm saying that what is in our backyard is the most unfamiliar place for us. It's sad. I want to be able to take my children to these places. I know that the idea is that they're all, great places of danger. The fact is that there are pockets of danger in every part of our country as well. But the other fact is that we are not taking the time to learn more about our neighborhood. We're looking past our right hand to the west and past our left hand to the east without really trying to find out what is close to us. Because contrary to what you're always taught, familiarity doesn't breed contempt. It's unfamiliarity that breeds contempt. The thing I've learned traveling is that the moment you can put a face to someone or something, you can no longer hate it. Back up again. The fact is, one of the most hated characters, we talk about it, in our subcontinent at a certain time was General Musharraf. He was president of Pakistan at the time when I interviewed him, and of course it was a tough interview for me. There were questions about Kargil, there were questions about terrorism. But I ended the interview by asking him, so what was it that made you join the army? And he looked at me and smiled and said, you're going to meet my mother next. Why don't you ask her? I was thinking, General Musharraf's mummy has the answer. Okay, fine. So then I went to interview his mother. And I said, is it true? And he said that he joined the army because you told him to. And she said, yes. And I said, well, why? And she said, because I love the uniforms. I thought they were so smart. I was thinking, This man who has had such a massive impact on our region, a massive impact, a lot of it negative, but a large footprint on our region and on Pakistan as well as, of course, here in India, joined the army and got all this power simply because his mother liked the uniform. The interesting thing was, it was the one thing I've heard from mothers and sons in the army here as well. There's a connection that at very basic levels that we suddenly start making when we try to reach out, unlearn the familiar, and go to learn the unfamiliar. When we talk about men in uniform, these are pictures of naval warships going into Lebanon, one into Libya. I'll tell you quickly the story of getting into Lebanon again. What I learned is that these men wear uniforms and look really tough, end up being the softest and the shyest guys around. When I got on board this ship, the admiral didn't want to take me. He took the other journalists, he didn't want to take me. We were going from Cyprus into Lebanon, which was being bombed by the Israelis, and there was a blockade there. And I said, why won't you take me? And he said, you're a woman, I have 500 men on board, what do you want me to do? And in fact, I hardly ever got to see any of those men because they were always ducking around corners to avoid seeing me. They had big hearts. So on the way back in from Lebanon, we covered the war, we came back. They had on board about 800 guests. Many of them were women, and they weren't just Indians. They were able to take, the Indian Navy made several trips evacuating people from the violence in Lebanon. Some of them were from Sri Lanka, some from Bangladesh, a couple even from America over there. And let me tell you, the sailors on board all gave up their bunks so that the women could have privacy and stay over there. They certainly are amongst the softest people around. The third thing I learned is that those who have the least will share it the most. You know, we spend a lot of time trying to interview the rich and the famous outside the best, most fabulous houses, sitting on the footpath. I can tell you where the shade is in a lot of cases, at what time of day. I can tell you what's the most comfortable flagstone. But it's very rare that you actually get offered a glass of water. And yet, I've covered, you know, flash floods in Leh, been to completely tsunami-devastated villages, and they'll offer you a full meal. And there's one story that stood out for me in Gujarat in 2002 of this family who was in an area of Ahmedabad where they'd been told the mob was headed their way. And they had to pack very quickly. So as I was following the family, they were trying to figure out what was important because nothing would be left once the mob had been there. And even then, the lady of the house turned to me and said, "Pani piso, kami chai joiye? Do you want tea? Do you want water?" And that certainly stayed with me. But all of this reinforces for us as journalists, certainly that there is no familiar, that every day is a new day. But actually, we only go to cover stories when things happen. We get there after something is happening. We speak about their stories. They are not our stories. We report, we see, and then we go home. Sometimes we actually become a part of it. And that's the last story I want to share with you. In 2000, I was a reporter there in Kashmir. It was August. I covered a ceasefire that had fallen apart between the government and the Hizbul Mujahideen. I then talked about some grenades that had been thrown in towns nearby. After which, I packed my bags and I headed into town to meet an old family friend and to do some shopping. My daughters were 1 and 3 years old at the time. Because that's what we do as journalists. There's a story, we report the story, we go. As we got to a traffic light over there, I heard a bang. And of course, this is also what we do as journalists. Most people, when they hear a bang, go running off in the opposite direction. We actually run towards it. The whole thing about fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And so I got to this spot to see what had happened. And I wasn't the only moron there, let me tell you. There were other journalists who had also reached. And we saw this grenade lying there pretty uselessly in a ditch next to a car. So we sat there and leaned against the car and sort of swapped notes. A few of the journalists were from Delhi, so we spoke about what flights we'd be going back on. And suddenly the atmosphere changed over there. And we were just turning to each other and saying, "Yeah, these stories are dead." You know, kind of. And we saw the police come in. Then we saw the bomb squad come in, and we got pushed out. And then in the matter of literally, it must have been a split second, Yet for me, it remains a very, very vivid memory. And the sound of something even softer than just, I learned to unlearn the familiar and really learn something very unfamiliar. We became a part of the story. The car next to us blew up. Somebody, fortunately for me, pushed me down. And as I looked up, there was a whole shard of glass over our head. And we realized that that car had completely exploded. It had a cylinder inside it packed with explosives. This is a little difficult to see. But 15 people died on the spot that day. Some more died a little later. And if there was something to learn for us, it was to unlearn the familiar, unlearn the complacency that we always live with the idea that we somehow are immortal and would be able to constantly talk about a story with the screen that they were talking about, that Nitin Ron was talking about, without being touched by it. Everybody will have a day. You're all young, you'll all have a day that will change your life, and I can tell you personally, for me, that was certainly a day that changed the way I played. I do want to say something larger over here. You know, I've covered Kashmir for years. I've covered India-Pakistan dialogue for decades. And the one phrase that you constantly hear from people, from the young, from the old, who are reacting to what is happening in our subcontinent, is always the phrase stated positions. We can't budge from our stated positions. There's a stated position on the LOC, there's a stated position on Siachen, there's a stated position on the UN resolutions that nobody can move on from. Let me tell you, I think it is time for our leaders to learn the unfamiliar, to move away, move away from the stated position really, and embrace the unfamiliar in that sense. I think learning the unfamiliar will make a big difference to peace in the region. Personally, I think learning the unfamiliar was the difference between life and death. Thank you.